And I think he'll be a great teammate. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to find a way to do whatever it takes to now survive. Will he? I don't know. He'll be in the NFL for a couple of years for sure. Will he get a shot as a starter? So many dominoes have to fall that way. I hope he does. I hope Dylan Gabriel gets a shot as a starter. I just think Cleveland is so unique. Like, I look at that thing and I'm like, Joe Flacco's the shortest thing. And then you got two guys that have never been there, and Kenny, who's been now he's on his third team. It's a situation where I'm struggling finding, like, how is it healthy? How is there enough oxygen in the room for everybody in the room? I don't know that. Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option post NFL draft pre-final spring game in all of college football. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, as always joined by Jim Thornby. And today's episode, of course, is fueled by our founding sponsor, 76, keeping you on the go so you never miss a beat. Jim, I am almost done going. I'm almost done, man, at least for the summertime. Heading up to Dawgs After Dark, Motley. Cannot wait to see Jed Fish and this program in year 2 for him. We will dive into all things UW shortly. And then I'm going to go hang out with some Cougs the next week. That's for another podcast, different conversation. But it's all UW and it's all post-draft recap for us here today. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. And yeah, once the spring games are done, then I feel like you can actually start to like dive into what will teams actually look like next year. You know, with the portal kind of as it starts to wrap up. I mean, obviously still a lot of dudes out there, but like you can actually go, okay, this guy's on this team, that guy's on this team. Here's the plus and minus of all of it. But we'll get to all that in the upcoming weeks. But yeah, this one's all about the draft, and it was a record-setting viewership for draft. We'll get to probably why that is.
Not that hard, folks. Not that hard.
A little bit later, more so about who wasn't picked, and again, I've got a lot to say about that part. But I think it's cool. Like, I think we should just start. Take it more chronological and start at the beginning. It was cool to see Cam Ward go number 1 overall. He's at least in my eyes, he's probably the only one, and I guess according to NFL teams too, the only one that you're like, that's a starting quarterback in this league. There's a lot of other guys that are like, oh yeah, he could be a starting quarterback in this league, but Cam is the one where you're like, he is a starting quarterback in this league. So it was cool to see him go number 1 overall. If he was in last year's draft, he wouldn't have gotten number 1 overall. Probably still in the top 10 or so because it was such a quarterback heavy draft as opposed to this year. But I thought that was such a cool story from, us getting to spend a lot of time with him from his Washington State days and then at the Heisman and stuff like that. So I thought that was, a fun one there.
Yeah. It's interesting when you go top, like high level. Cam Ward drafted first, Quinn Ewers the last quarterback drafted, right? Like, Think about that. 0 stars, the greatest recruit in the history of the world. Like, that's big picture. Then you go into like the context of it and dive into like the thoughtfulness of it. Here's Cam, where 2 years ago he did declare for the NFL draft. And then said, whoa, hold up. Somebody maybe got in his ear. I don't think it was just, let me go make a bunch of money at Miami. It was like, where can I improve my draft stock? What does next year's class look like? Chooses to continue his career, plays another year, Heisman finalist, number 1 pick. I mean, the story is phenomenal. Big shout out to Calvin and his mom. That's his father and his mom. Just the way that they helped navigate this whole thing, right? The humility he carried from a high school player with no offers, begging to go D3, to his dad cold calling schools, to ending up at Incarnate Ward with now the head coach at North Texas and Eric Morris. Then stay with us, follows him to Wazoo, where he learns from Jake Dickert and Eric Morris in year 1. But year 2, Morris gets the head job that I just mentioned, and in comes the young offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle. And it was a really cool opportunity, I think, for those that are now fans of Cam Ward that know more of his story. He had known a system for a couple of years and was teaching players that system his first year in Pullman. And then here came a different set of eyes, a different coach, a different scheme, a different philosophy. He had to adjust to that, and he did. It wasn't, I know everything, I'm the captain. It was like, let me grow my game. And what you saw was, I think his feed, his mechanics just continue to get cleaned up and tweaked. Ball's out there, then goes to Miami, clearly has a special season, and then gets drafted. And the one constant amid all of his change is his work ethic, man. Like, it is just, you can feel it, whether it's short social media clips, which I get can be like placed beautifully and marketed beautifully, but that's who he is. I've got to know him, I think, as well as probably a lot of analysts around the country, and the core of him and the foundation of him. And that hasn't changed. And he's going to roll in there, and I'm not going to say like take the league by storm, but he's going to go in there and be a pro from the jump. Everything that you need will be there. And then to bookend it with Quinn, and I love what Steve Sarkisian said earlier this week. He was asked, like, how come Quinn didn't stay and transfer, go make a ton of money? And Sark made a great point, Jim, where it was like, let's not light this kid up because he decided to go chase his dream and he felt as though he finished the job at his dream school. Like, he went to Texas, grew up in Austin, went there, balled out. Like, why should we judge him for then saying my time in college is done, let me go pursue this dream, versus, hey, I had to go make a bunch more money. Like, we don't know those values. And I felt like that was really a lot of the narrative. And I thought it was really thoughtful from Steve Sarkisian, referencing, like, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't light the kid up for going to make money at another place and not going to the draft, or for going to the draft and not getting picked really high and not going to make a ton of money in the era we're in. Like, guys sometimes are ready for the next thing. And I think that's important to note, because that'll be the conversation, whether it's Cade Klubnik next year in the draft. It could be Dante Moore next year in the draft if he's the guy. It could be Jade Mayava next year in the draft. Like, it could be a lot of guys that are third year. Yeah, Arch, like, draft eligible. Like, should they come back and make more money? And I think that often gets thrown out there. Like, yeah, Michael Penix Jr. came back for a sixth year to get paid. Or he came back to go lead his team to a national championship appearance. Bo Nix came back to get paid. And, you know, like, two things can be true. And I think that's been a theme of our last couple of weeks. And it'll be a part of today's conversation around the draft as we get further into the conversation of, like, two things can be true. And I think for the quarterback scenario, I think it's a note for all of us to just receive and be okay with it, versus like snap judgment like we saw for the majority of the coverage around the NFL draft.
Yeah, and it was cool to, like, thinking about, you know, we saw Cam in New York for the Heisman. The other two West Coast guys that were with us there, you know, Travis, obviously the winner. He got the Jaguars traded up to go get him. I think that was a good move for them, because the Jaguars are that one team, maybe not the one team, but definitely a team in the NFL that needs that star presence to kind of, like, get people interested in, you know. No, this isn't a knock on Trevor Lawrence. I think he's been an adequate quarterback in the league, but this is a team that quote unquote has to go play games in London every year, to kind of, like, get some excitement around them. So I think him going to Jacksonville will be a nice shot in the arm for that organization as far as of drawing interest around that team. And then our guy Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders, a team that definitely needed a running back when you look at the roster that they have. And it was funny, because when I saw him get picked to the Raiders, obviously there was the Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, you know, you can speak on that. But the first thing that came to my mind is, it was less than a year ago, Ashton's in Vegas having his own media day, you know, because he's not old enough to be at the Mountain West Media Day because of the casino rules there. So it's just funny how life works in that way.
Yeah, totally. And again, I'll just hit the note on him. He didn't leave to another school. Like, I think that's just amazing for Boise State. Retire his jersey. You know, retire a jersey. Like, it really is impressive. I said it was the deepest running back room I'd seen in the last 15 years in terms of this year's draft. I think it proved to be that when you look at the guys that were drafted. I also think that once you got past, I'd argue, Travis Hunter, it was kind of like, what are your needs? What's best available?
Yeah.
And go from there. Like, there wasn't a ton of, you know, trading going on after the Jacksonville trade. You know, it was, the Browns weren't going to take a quarterback. Obviously, they didn't make that move, and away they went. So I thought that was pretty cool, just to kind of see what the Raiders did. And here we are Raider fans. I mean, that is our team right now in the National Football League. So we'll give you some Raider news as the season continues to come upon us. And I think I'm actually going to head out there for a mini camp. So I'll see if we can do a little content from there when I get out there later in May.
Nice. And to your point about the running backs, both Ohio State backs, they went almost back to back there in the second round. So, a lot of value there. Caleb Johnson to the Steelers. I thought that was like
perfect,
a total Steelers pick. I mean, it was like when he got picked, I was like, oh yeah, that completely makes sense. But when you talk about like drafting, at your, for your best available players, and that's what the Panthers said that they did with T-Mac. Which was cool to see him go number 8 overall. Just 3 picks after his high school teammate, Mason Graham, went number 5 overall. But it was funny because there was some, criticism of the Panthers going, they had last year one of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL last year. But it wasn't like their offense was great either. Like they need to give Bryce Young some weapons to figure out if Bryce Young is really kind of the guy. Like Bryce Young is only going to be as good as the guys around him. So you need to put some real guys in there, and then you can tell, okay, we got a quarterback here in Bryce Young that can lead us to it. And what's kind of cool too is now that Bryce Young and T-Mac are teammates, I saw like they were like, oh, California Love. They played each other in high school because they were rivals. Because Bryce was at Mater Dei. He's 2 years older than T-Mac, but they played his senior year and T-Mac's sophomore year. Mater Dei won 56-11 back in 2019. So get to reunite there. And then the Panthers also took another West Coast guy with Jimmy Horn Jr. From Colorado in the 6th round. So get a little West Coast love in Carolina this year.
I think out of all the picks, I was most excited for Tetairoa McMillan. Honestly, I mean, you're thrilled for all these guys. We get to meet a bunch of them along the course of their journey. It's hard to probably beat Cam, but for T-Mac, the way that he was being talked about, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I have an opinion. I don't think he was accurate. I don't think that it was appropriate, but he did say it. He said what he said when he was a freshman. It looked like somebody was filming him as he's eating breakfast, and I don't really watch film. And 2 things can be true. I know a lot of receivers in the NFL that are not like the craziest film junkies. They're just monsters. Right. I'm not saying he's either one of those things. He's still got a lot to prove. What I kind of liked about the pick and even the narrative is now, and T-Mac like I know T-Mac, he's got an edge to him. He's an elite competitor. He's a gifted athlete. Everything comes really natural to him. And now there's a narrative around him that is questioning his craft. And I think that's going to be a great thing for the Carolina Panthers and my dear friend, Dave Canales. Dave and I worked together at USC 20 years ago. When I left to get into broadcasting, Dave came in and actually took the job that I had at USC at the time. I told Pete, I said, Pete, this guy's going to be a star. He was coaching junior college at the time, right around the corner here in LA. And his path is obvious, what it's been since then, Seahawks, Tampa Bay, now the head coach. So getting a guy like T-Mac, he knows his language in terms of being a West Coast guy, but to the point of like people telling you who you are when it's something you don't want to hear, that's different than saying like, you're the greatest thing ever. When they're saying, well, do you take it that serious? What do you think about that? And now he's going to go out and show out. And then the last thing, it's a clinic. I saw it on, I think our buddy, Coach Casey on Twitter put it out. They asked him, somebody asked him a question in the media at his initial opening press conference. And it said, I'll paraphrase, do you think you're the best receiver in the room? The current room, the room he's never even been in, the teammates he's never even met. And he just pauses, kind of smirks and goes, I'm not going to answer that. And I just love that, Jim. I love that because, of course, it's easy to be like, yeah, I'm the only top 10 pick in the room. Like, or you could boast about yourself. You could be feeling yourself in the moment. But the thoughtfulness required to take a beat, to me, is a reflection of how he was raised, where he played his ball growing up, and how he was coached, from Jed Fish to Brent Brennan and all the people in between. And I just kind of love that moment for him because we kept hearing he's going to slide. And I'm not a chirper on the internet, but I almost wanted to be like, why are we saying this? Like, he's a monster. What are we talking about? He's 6'4", nearly 230. Like, look out. This guy's going to be a freak.
And it's funny, too, you talk about that humbleness because you could probably make the argument, what is the most alpha position on the football field? Is it the wide receiver or the cornerback as far as, those outside players that talk the most? about like, I'm the greatest. I'm like, the most flamboyant players in the history of football, probably 90% of them either play wide receiver or corner. So it's like kind of funny that like he's kind of breaking away from that mold. I know one guy that you were really high on going into the draft, and I was kind of surprised, was Tyler Warren being the second tight end going off the board at number 14 to the Colts. Colston Loveland was the number 10 pick to the Bears. And I thought, especially like when you think about, the Ben Johnson, the new coach of the Bears, and, kind of the wonderkind that is around, aura that's around him and his offense, it seemed like Tyler Warren and how versatile he is would have been a perfect combination for being in that system when they already have Cole Kmet to kind of be that traditional tight end, and Tyler can kind of be that, jack of all trades, do everything kind of guy.
Yeah, I think that one to me is always like, what flavor of ice cream do you like more?
Right.
They're all good. And I think that the people that I talked to after the draft around that position, it was really that. Like Colston Loveland, he's a different type of route runner, right? He's more receiver in terms of explosiveness, how he gets in and out of breaks, like that type of thing. Than Tyler, who former high school Elite 11 quarterback. Check that out on Elite 11's Instagram page. But more of like, I don't know, he's got this athleticism to him that's like sneaky, where he is always separating. He can always just make a play, but he's not like as crisp as Colston Loveland when you break them down. So to me, it was kind of a coin flip. I was going with Warren. He was kind of my sneaker pick of the entire draft. He went where a lot of people projected him. And then I think when you net out, it's like, I could see both of those guys in those uniforms. Like, of course, like Dallas Clark and Tyler Warren.
True.
Got it.
True.
Like I was like, perfect. Happy for them. Both good spots. Both young quarterback or unique, fluid quarterback situations. One could argue, at least in Indy. Caleb, of course, is the guy in Chicago. Those two are going to have 40-plus grabs this season, if not more. Again, I'm really excited for them. And it was just another exclamation point on the Big Ten and the talent that came out of the draft from that league.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at like Ohio State had 14 picks. They had the most.
Totally. I thought they had more.
And everything. The Ducks had 10. They had two guys go in the back end of the first round. They had Derek Harmon go number 21 by the Steelers, Josh Connerly number 29 to the Commanders, and just a heartbreaking story with Derek Harmon. His mom was in critical condition. He gets picked. He's like, in his pressure, like, hey, I'm going to go check on my mom. He's able to at least get to the hospital and meet with her so she can know that he got drafted, and then she passed away like right after. So just a really a heartbreaking story, but just happy for him that he was at least able to have that moment with her before she passed.
Yeah, that's well said. I think on the football front, I'm coming off calling the Oregon Spring Game this past weekend with Guy Haberman on the Big Ten Network and Kenyon Barner. I think when I look at Oregon and you look at the players drafted, it just keeps growing. 6, 8, 10. It's just going to keep going. I mean, that's just what Dan Lanning's doing. It's very reflective of Ohio State. Neither one, Ohio State or Oregon, has ever lost a starter in the portal. At least neither one lost a starter this year. Under Dan Lanning, Oregon's never lost a starter in the transfer portal. Like, they're just the behemoths that are continually going to grow. A big reason of that is the development. And I think that gets thrown out a lot. I think at Oregon, what gets thrown out a little too much is like, yeah, they just pay for everybody. They can go get everybody. Josh Connerly was a huge recruit. He showed up, played as a freshman as their sixth, jumbo offensive lineman, and then just kept growing. You look at Derek Harmon and a bunch of other players that came in the portal. They didn't just show up and just roll out and play the same way they played the year before. Like, they got better. Jordan Birch, another guy that got drafted. You could look at a litany of transfer players. That's why they got top safety in the portal and Dylan Thieneman in there now. Like, Dan Lanning, what he says is reflected in where you get drafted and more importantly for the Ducks, like how you play on the field. And I think that's a cool note. We see a high school guy and a portal guy both get drafted in the first round and both developed within their time in Eugene, whether it was only, little less than a year, I guess, or if it was, of course, the 3+ years.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, and we'll talk, one of those Ducks, Dylan Gabriel, we'll talk about him a little bit more here when we talk about the quarterback section as a whole. But, he was on day 2. I thought some of the cool names I saw getting picked on day 2. Carson Schlesinger was the very first pick of the second round by the Browns. Big Jonah at Arizona going to the Dolphins.
Oh, I wanted him to fall to the Raiders, but I was happy he got picked high.
Another Duck, Terrence Ferguson going to the Rams.
First tight end in 11 years at Oregon being drafted.
That's
and they're going to have another one next year in Kenyon Sadiq if he chooses to opt out. Look out.
For sure. And then the Cougs got their one pick from this year's draft. Kyle Williams, who we got a chance to spend time with last summer in Vegas. He went 69th overall to the Patriots in the third round. So I just like, it's always the fun part for me with the draft is just following all these kids. And I'll say kids because, college versus pros.
We're old. Yeah.
Yeah, we're old. But it's just cool to follow these guys that we got to see play throughout that era and move on to follow their dreams.
Amen, man. Really well said. I loved watching some of that. I saw Jay Toia at UCLA practice the week before. We walk in and he's looking sweet, right? Looks great shape. Like everybody's always in great shape in advance of the draft. And I bring in like 10, 9 and 10-year-olds for our little flag football team. We run in and I'd just been on NFL's Good Morning Football talking about Jay as my sleeper. Everybody watches that dude. Like, he came up to me. Thank you for saying what you said. We got a photo with him and my kids and our team. It was awesome, man. So to then a week later, or just like, hear his name and know how excited he was. It was cool. And I think UCLA deserves a shout out. Like, look at what Olufemi Oladejo did, week 3. They're like, you can't play off the ball linebacker for us anymore because that's not going to give us the best chance to win. Go play the edge and you might make money there. I think Deshaun Foster's quote after it might have been the Penn State game or the LSU game, like he just made himself a bunch of money. and look what he did, right? It's the same thing with Carson Schlesinger. I mean, find a better story there in the draft in terms of a one-time walk-on at Oaks Christian, and he's playing linebacker with another Power 5 linebacker, Power 5 guy. I don't know if he's even playing anymore. He might chip transferred a couple times, Ethan Calvert. And then here comes Carson becoming a second-round pick, leading the Big Ten in tackles. I mean, that part was really cool, to your point, to watch these guys and get to know them early on, whether it's high school or freshman or as you're calling games, and then watch them actualize that thing, man. It's still, I know it's a business and all that, but I loved watching whether it was like Will Howard crying when the Steelers drafted him, like even Quinn Ewers when he's the last quarterback taken, like whether it's Cam Ward, like all of those moments when you pour so much into it. I thought back to being a player. Like you pour so much into it, and then you get this one moment that you've literally dreamt about since you were a child, most likely. Like this is the best TV going. Like get off of the talent on air. Like keep it on these guys as much as possible.
Well, that was, Cam Scadabit. The cameras were on him when he got picked by the Giants there in the 4th round. And New York fans are going to love him. Like that's his personality is going to shine out there. But some of those other like day 3 guys besides Cam, you mentioned Jay going in the 7th round of the Cowboys, just some of the ones that kind of stood out to me. And there's way more than just who I'm listing here, but Alec Elminer going to the Titans in the 4th round, Jeffrey Bassa, who we had a couple of years in a row at Media Day, going 5th round to the Chiefs, which I think that's actually a great spot for him. Tez Johnson going the 7th round to Tampa. Damian Martinez. Now, Oregon State did not have a player get picked in this draft, but Damian Martinez, we know him as an Oregon State player. He was developed as an Oregon State player, kind of whatever. He goes to the 7th round to the Seahawks, so he'll be up there with Charbonnet. And then what I thought was a really cool pick was Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt from Arizona, who really kind of just had his whole last year of college, just had the rug just taken out from him by NCAA stuff. He went in the 7th round to the Commanders, so it was nice to see him get to have a positive moment on there to kind of, wrap up the draft. He went 245th overall. But obviously the big story, and I mentioned the ratings for this. I think it all is going to go around the quarterbacks and who did not get, and the one that did not get picked until the 5th round, which was Shedeur Sanders. And I think there was, I've never seen anything like, the president of the United States is tweeting out about, his his scouting of Shedeur. But like, I've never seen anything like this. And I think it really sadly hijacked the entire draft. I mean, granted, this drew up viewership, and like, I'm sure the bosses at, ESPN and NFL Network, which I think are those are almost going to be the same thing here pretty soon, are probably happy with that. But it wasn't great TV. And I think it was a disservice to a lot of the other, I think it was a disservice to Shedeur as well, but it was a disservice to all the other kids that got drafted during that time that, it wasn't being this was their day to celebrate these guys. And instead we're talking about this giant controversy, which in my mind was not really a controversy.
Yeah. Again, we go back to two things can be true. I didn't watch ESPN, so I don't really have a take on the Mel Kiper thing. I've been told a ton about it, and obviously you've seen clips of it. I watch NFL Network just because big DJ guy, Daniel Jeremiah. I think he's the best draft analyst in my lifetime that I've seen. And I say that because his economy of words and his ability to say things that matter just continue to stand out, right? So it's fit with the team, it's evaluation, it's something personal. He's lighthearted, he's self-deprecating, he's in and out, and it's tight. I think the Shedeur Sanders conversation is one that merits a lot of opinions, and that's okay. Like, we're super passionate about the sport and about the craft. I think all of us, me included, as analysts of this great game, it feels good when you're right. Feels good when you're right. I love calling a game and predicting they're going to throw it to number 3 at the bottom, and I circle them and they throw it to him. Like, I give myself a little pat on the back when it happens. Like, that's part of it. I think what seemingly got off the rails a little bit when it came to the broadcasts of the NFL draft was it seemed to be like everyone wanted to show that the NFL teams were wrong, versus like they told you in the first 3 rounds that they weren't going to take them. And the history of the NFL at the quarterback position would tell you, for the most part, if you're not chosen as a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, if not 3 rounds, you're not seen as a potential starter. I'll go back to Russell Wilson. He's drafted by the Seahawks. They signed Matt Flynn to a record deal. Remember that? And then all of a sudden, like, Russell beat him out, right? It wasn't anticipated dramatically. They were like, we really like him. That'd be cool. But they thought they had their guy. So the point is that everything in the history of the NFL will tell you, if you're not drafted early, then you're seen as a backup. And that's just the truth. Years and years ago, I can remember talking to somebody, a guy named Pat Kerwin, who I just love. He's been a mentor for over 20 years now. And he used to always say, like, the NFL just tells you the truth. And I get that there's conspiracy theories out there, and I'm not here to get into any of them, Jim. I could care less, to be honest with you. But there is something to, like, NFL teams, and I'm not trying to compare professions, but I don't know of another profession that is as ruthless as the NFL. I just don't know of one. I'm sure they exist, right? Politics might be one, but you don't get fired. You can't fire the president tomorrow, even if the economy tanks. Like, you could fire the head coach the day after he makes a questionable decision, a la the Bears over Thanksgiving, right? And what do you do at the end of the game? Gone the next day. Might have been gone anyway, but the point is, like, it's super ruthless. So they're trying to win. They're trying to win now. Like, coordinators are trying to score and score now. Like, there is no, like, let's draft a guy to develop him in the room as a quarterback. Like, you don't draft, like, Achilles Smith Jr. is on the Oregon Ducks roster. He's a true freshman. He's 6'5", probably 220, and he runs like a deer, but he's not a full packaged, polished quarterback right now. They brought him in to develop and sit behind Austin Novosad and Luke Moga and Dante Moore. You don't really do that in the NFL. It doesn't really happen unless you're, like, so dynamic as a runner and you're Antoine Randall, or you just got this unique skill set that, like, can be used in a bunch of different ways. At least not that I'm aware of. So the Shedeur thing, like, 2 things can be true. Is he a really efficient on-rhythm passer? Heck yeah. Dramatically accurate? Hell yeah. Tough as nails? I would agree with that. And 2 things can be true. Did he struggle in some meetings in terms of giving the staffs what they were seeking to convince them to draft him to be the face of a franchise? Yeah, clearly. Clearly that happened. And it also happened to other guys who slid in the draft. Quinn Ewers is another one of them, whether it was his physical traits, whether it was in the mean. Like, we don't know. But I don't think this was like, I don't think it was appropriate to comp it to Colin Kaepernick. And it was like this thing against the Sanders family. I think there's a couple lessons we could pull out of it. Like the way that Coach Prime, I think, navigated the promotion of his son of, yeah, we're going to choose the team we go to. Like, I don't know if that turned teams off, but it definitely didn't say, like, let me go draft you. Dylan Gabriel, who to me, I've said it how many times now, like greatest hit factor I've seen in 25 years. Like, you meet him, you spend time with him, it just cements the decision. I would imagine, well, I'm not imagining, I'm going to tell you that like the teams that met him, because it's been out so many times from so many different outlets, it went the other way. Like if they wanted to cement the decision, it went to be like, So now you're a backup quarterback. And what's your job as a backup quarterback? To be the greatest teammate ever, not to go take the guy's job. I'll give you a quick story and I'll get your feedback here. There was a quarterback who was really talented a couple years ago, came out in the NFL draft, and he had a chance to go to a team in the NFL where his skill set was similar to the starting quarterback. And he went into his meeting and they said, what's your goal if we draft you here? And he goes, I'm going to go win the job. I'm going to go be the starter. They just paid the guy like $100 million. So the front office and the staff was like, love it. Not the fit we need as a backup quarterback. So he went somewhere else, ironically found his way back to that team anyway. So maybe you could piece it all together. But my point is that like when they're drafting for the backup, they're looking for something specific. So now my question to the Cleveland Browns is one that many probably are asking. You got capable quarterbacks in the room. Joe Flacco, hosted him at Pitt. Love the guy. Kenny Pickett, hail to Pitt. Love the guy. And now you have Deshaun, which assuming who won't play Deshaun Watson, excuse me. And then you have Dylan and Shedeur. Like, how are you going to split up reps? This isn't like the Oregon Ducks where you're going like two fields, or UW under Jed Fish where you have that many players all the time. Like I think it's just be hard to figure it out. I hope both of those young rookies get a shot. I know their play on the field will determine who ends up getting kept, but both of those guys unlikely to be on the same roster, in my lens at least, come roster cuts during training camp.
Yeah, and when you think about the draft too, it's all about, not only just the best player, but where are your needs? And so many teams went into this draft not needing a starting quarterback. So obviously Shedeur did not go in the first round. So in that, if you're taken in the first round, you're a guy that like, hey, we're either going to start you right away. Like I imagine Cam Ward is going to probably be expected to start right away, or Jackson Dart, who went in the back end of the first round, we expect you to become the starter. We have some guys right now that can be
one-year deals.
Yeah, we have them in there, and hopefully by the end of the year, you've beaten them out and are now the starter. After that, to your point, like, do we think you're a starter, or do we think maybe you can become a starter, or can you be like that good teammate? And obviously,
and I don't think it's good teammate. I think we should rephrase. Like, I don't think he's been a really good teammate. I think like all of his teammates. I don't want to get taken out of context for us.
Yeah. Like, no, I wasn't suggesting that he wasn't. I'm just saying that's what an NFL team is wanting to.
And I think he'll be a great teammate. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to find a way to do whatever it takes to now survive. Will he? I don't know. He'll be in the NFL for a couple of years for sure. Will he get a shot as a starter? So many dominoes have to fall that way. I hope he does. I hope Dylan Gabriel gets a shot as a starter. I just think Cleveland is so unique. Like, I look at that thing and I'm like, Joe Flacco's the shortest thing. And then you got two guys that have never been there, and Kenny, who's been now he's on his third team. It's a situation where I'm struggling finding like, how is it healthy? How is there enough oxygen in the room for everybody in the room? I don't know that. I know the quarterback coach, so do you, and Bill Musgrave, one-time Oregon Duck, one-time Cal Bear offensive coordinator, old school as they come. Yep. God, I'd love Hard Knocks to be in there. I don't think they are. Have they decided who's the Hard Knocks team?
I don't think they have yet. But also, like, all the last 2 years, Colorado football was the biggest story in college football as far as like attention. Everything they did, positive or negative, viral. And while that was terrific for Colorado, as far as getting them from a, not just a team that, couldn't win games to, they only went 13-12, as we've heard many times in those 2 years, but that's such a giant leap from where they were. The attendance, such a giant leap from where they were. Just an overall relevance, such a giant leap from where they were. That worked great for them and for him during that time. Now, the NFL teams, unless you are the starter, it doesn't really work great for them to have someone on the bench that all the attention is going to be about. Like, that's just a distraction. So I can see NFL teams being like, you know what? I don't need all this attention. I don't need to every week. If Shedeur is the third quarterback, like if he makes the team as the third quarterback, let's just spitball.
I don't think
here,
they will. Yeah,
I think they have to answer that. They have to answer that question every week, and that Deion has to answer that question every week in his Colorado presser. Like, I think it's just a thing that they don't really want to deal with if they don't have to, because we saw last year towards the end of the year, like, all the rumors about Deion getting the Cowboys job. So then, like, now would the rumors all be about, like, now Deion's going to come take my job as head coach of this team. So I think that played against him in that respect. You talked about his completion percentage. He had the highest completion percentage in the country last year, 74%. Over his 2 years, it was 71%, which was the highest career in college football history, really. Which is great. And I've seen a lot of people using that as a stat. But if you look at, like, those top 25 all time of career completion percentage in college, not a lot of dudes that made it in the NFL. Like, Joe Burrow was on that list,
yeah.
But it's a lot of guys that have gone on to become really good offensive coordinators.
Yeah, Luke Falk. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, that is a great stat. And yes, that is a plus in his column. But that is not the only thing that obviously creates, I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 of those top 25 were like guys who would go, he was a successful quarterback. There's a couple that were like backups in the NFL and stuff like that. But Joe Burrow was the one that stood out among all of that. Now, who knows? Maybe Shedeur could reach that level with everything. But it's going to be a long road.
Well said. Love that insight. Also, before we break here, talk about Washington and a little spring preview. I just want to remind everybody, go to yoption.com for all your insight into college football from the lens of the West Coast. Insight interviews. Just had Will Stein on, the offensive coordinator for the Oregon Ducks. Cannot wait to hear what your thoughts are as we're almost done with season 1. So again, all things college football, yoption.com. Get it directly into your inbox.
And the last thing I want to get to on the draft wise, and obviously, it was definitely a SEC Big Ten dominated draft. SEC set the record with 79 players drafted. They had 15 first round picks, which was more picks than anyone out of the quote unquote Power 4 had total picks.
It's crazy.
The Big Ten
79.
Had 79. The Big Ten had 71, which is a record for them, and which is more than the SEC's old record, which was 65.
But do records matter anymore? Like,
no, because they should have more. When you're getting all these teams, of course you're going to have more guys drafted. Like, there would be something wrong if there was not an increase in there. Like, all of a sudden it's not going to flatten out. They combined for 150 picks. That was 58.3% of the draft. 26 of the 32 first round picks. Now, what's interesting, if you pull it back apart now and then put everything back together from where we were conference alignment wise in 2024. So let me do quickly. 2025, ACC had 42 picks. Big 12 had 31 picks. So now if you kind of, again, pull this apart and put them back together, the old Pac-12 would have had 35 picks in this year's draft, a year after having 43 the year before, which was the most since they had 36 in 2017. So if you then pull all that apart, the Big Ten, 19 of those 71 picks that the Big Ten had came from those 4 Pac-12 schools that came over. So that was over 26% of their picks. Obviously, 10 of those came from the Ducks. But, if you get the ACC without the Pac-12 schools, that's down to 37. The Big 12 without the Pac-12 schools, that would have been down to 21. But then you have to add back in Texas and Oklahoma. So then that boosts back up to 35. Okay. So then you actually get ACC, Big 12, Pac-12, really all on the same plane. So nothing would have changed. College football would have been exactly the way it was the last decade without this realignment. So it's just kind of silly. And you kind of see some schools like Arizona had 4, Colorado had 4, UCLA had 5. Meanwhile, Utah only had 1. Washington only had 1 after having 10 the year before. So it was interesting. The Pac-12 would have had a very good year, but it would have been a little bit of a different mix with the players from the certain teams that we would have seen in the past.
Yeah, that's incredible math. Number one, glad you get to do that, and I just get to read
I love doing stuff like that. That's my favorite.
That's your favorite part. I appreciate you sharing that information with all of us here at Y Option. I want to touch on Utah for a second because they had been one of the teams, if not the team, that was kind of leading the old Pac-12 in terms of the amount of players drafted for a while, right? Especially it was defensive linemen, offensive linemen, corners, linebackers, running back and Zach Moss, tight ends they've had, Dalton Kincaid. Watching them this year, I had a couple thoughts in the draft. One is that when you look at Oregon, and you look at Ohio State, these are some high draft picks players. Yeah. I think when you look at Utah and some of these other teams that have a bunch of free agents, which is pretty much what Utah had, when you do find those teams on the field playing against each other, it's a discrepancy in talent. It just is. So I'm so curious to watch Utah this season and who are their NFL players. They've always played team ball in a really efficient way, but to get into the playoff now and then have to face a Penn State or an Oregon aforementioned, or some of these teams that are rolling with double-digit draft picks, that's where it just becomes a little bit different. You saw it with Indiana and Notre Dame in the first round of the playoff last year. Utah, to me, has always had 6 to 8 draft picks. It just seems that. I don't know if the numbers would bear that out, but that's what I always imagine, right? Bradley and I and company, Efotu and company. And now, of course, injuries hampered that, right? Cam Rising didn't finish the season. Mekhi Bernard, I think he ended up being a free agent. Guys that you thought might have a chance, and I'm sure they thought they would eventually get drafted. So it just kind of was a note for me of to track that next year's draft, because we're seeing some teams separate a little bit. Also, I think UCLA, the year they lose a ton on defense, right? Liatu Latu, the Murphy twins, you're thinking they're done on defense. What do they have? And 3 guys get drafted on the defensive side. I just think you got to give Ikaika Malloe and Deshaun Foster a little bit of love. For SC, I get it because they were young, and last year was a foundational year. I've said that many times, but want to see a receiver drafted. Want to see one of those playmakers. That's something that place has always had. In that regard, Woody Marks, congrats to him. He really developed when he got there, coming from Mississippi State. So fired up for him. That's to get a guy in the secondary, gets drafted as well early on, which was pretty cool. Just kind of see that happen for them. And then I think for the rebuilding teams like UW, it's coming. It's coming. So let's pivot there. I'm heading up to Dawgs After Dark right after this conversation. Jedd Fisch in his second season, he's got their spring game. He's going to have a game. I love these teams that keep having games. Jim, is going to be a blast. I'm going to be there. Marcel Reese, myself, Guy Haberman and company. We'll be on the call at night. Excited for a night game. It's a Friday night. It'll feel like high school football. Jedd Fisch did exactly what he did at your alma mater in terms of sending players out to the Greek community, into campus, trying to get people there. There's some energy around this, and there should be. So now I want to give you my eval on this team, and just hear me out. You don't have to be optimistic or pessimistic on year 2 in Jedd Fisch, but we know what he is. We know he's going to be a pristine play caller. We know he knows what he's doing as the CEO of a program. We know the staff, while they had to retool, losing Brennan Carroll and Steve Belichick, I don't think they flinched. They promote from within on the offensive line. They bring in Ryan Walters, former head coach at Purdue, who to me is kind of like a Justin Wilcox defensive mind for those out west. They're going to be just fine there. When I kind of get to 30,000 feet on my prep for this spring game, they have a big time playmaking college quarterback right now in Damon Williams. I don't know if he's an NFL player yet, but in college football and in the Big Ten, he's big time. He's a top third quarterback in the league, and he's different than everybody in the league. He just is in terms of his athleticism and how he can spin it. They got a top 5 running back in Jonah Coleman in all of college football. I don't think you can debate that. And he totally changed his body. Look no further than social media or tune in our broadcast. We'll show this side by side. Tight end room has a bunch of promise. Get Quinton Moore back, after just a gnarly, freaky type of injury thing early on in game 1. Wide receiver, at first you're like, I don't know. And then you start thinking of the Big Ten. And you're like, no, they're probably in the top third of the league in 18 teams. Denzel Boston coming off of an injury. They got some young players from transfers. Can't wait to evaluate. That's a big question mark. I want to see that on Friday night. Offensive line, 100% is going to be better. 100% is going to be better. They're bringing Carver Willis, transfer from Kansas State, to play what I think will be the left tackle position. They got 4 tackles that have all started at the Power 4 level. They're going to be better on the interior. They recruited well from freshmen. So offensive line is going to be 100% better. And again, I go back to the play caller, Jedd Fisch knowing what not to do, right? Couldn't stop Oregon last year. I think they had 10 sacks against Damon Williams in his first start. That's not going to happen again. Okay, let's flip it to defense. D-line, I think it's improved. Linebackers, they have improved, and they add, I think, a tackling machine in Buda Alukta, former Washington State Coug. Corners, you know these guys, Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock. Takario Davis, Ephesians Prysock did not have the season that I think everyone thought they might have in year 1 with Brent Brennan or year 1 in Seattle, but they're both 6'4". They both have played for the same guy in the secondary. Like I think they're going to be just fine. Safety is TBD, but they bring in a couple players via the portal, and they're going to develop a couple guys. CJ Christian is a big guy, came in from FIU. Alex McLaughlin, I'm looking at my board here, transferred from Northern Arizona. So I say all that, and the special teams, they'll be fine. They bring back Grady Gross for another season. They got to find a punter. But you net out on this thing, big picture, and you're like, all right, I don't know if they have real competitive depth. Most teams don't, that aren't Michigan, Ohio State, those teams, Oregon, Penn State in the Big Ten. Do they have a true number 1 receiver? I don't know, but we'll see. Can't wait to find that out. Do they have a freak off the edge? I don't know. Maybe Zach Durfee's that guy once he gets healthy. But overall, this is going to be a much improved team that went to a bowl game last year. I just think they got a shot to do stuff this year. I'm not saying they're going to go win the league, but they're going to be dangerous in year 2 under Jedd Fisch, much like Arizona was dangerous in year 2 and then eventually year 3. You got a quarterback only in his second year. He's coming back again. Having gotten in the weeds, Jim, and coming out of it now, UW is in a much, much healthier position they were a year ago, and a healthier position than I probably thought they would be in, having just read about the team in the offseason versus truly doing the deep dive.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mentioned that UW only had 1 player drafted in this year's draft, but as far as as Jedd is concerned, Arizona had 4 guys picked in this year's draft. 3 of those 4 were his recruits, and that was the most Arizona had since 2008. So as far as what Jedd is going to be telling recruits, as far as come to UW and play for me, that's where you're seeing that development. It might not have been UW year 1, but it was his guys that he saw, come through there to get picked. So just kind of putting a little button on the draft conversation onto your UW stuff there.
Love it, man. Yeah, I can't wait to get there. I love being around him. I've known him for a long time. We met in Seattle in 2009, both interviewing for the Seahawks. He's been on this show a bunch of times, including throughout the season. We'll get him on again. But I'll give you a full report on the way back. I'll make sure I write something up, thoughts from the sky as I'm flying back to LA on a Saturday. And the final news, Jim, that you might not be aware of, but we're in a playoff run right now in our flag football team. Sunday is we're in and we're in. We win and we're in. We lose and it's up to the computers. It's up to the people that know how to do the tiebreakers. I don't want to mess with them. So we got to practice before I hop on this flight. And then away we go and come on back this weekend and let's see if we can get after a final regular season game, man. Can't wait.
Bring it home. Home.
We'll see. According to my GM, my owner, which is my wife, if we don't win, I might be out. So I'll let you know. Maybe we'll do like double the episodes next week, just because.
Do we need a hot board for your team's coaching search?
All I'm saying is that like if it gets hot out there, just have my back on the internet, okay? Just have my back, if you don't mind, because she puts me on blast pretty regularly.
I'm hearing good things about the DC, so I'm not sure. Like, maybe they're
Mike Hughes. Like, hey, we're trying to sign him to a multi-year deal. I just need to be a part of his piece. So cheer on the Dolphins this weekend if you're in Los Angeles with the NFL flag. Cheer on the Dogs if you're up in Seattle. And thanks for cheering us on here at Y Option. This is a deep dive on the NFL draft, a little preview for the Washington Huskies 2025 team under Jed Fish. I'll be there for Dawgs After Dark. Check it out at Big Ten Network. Jim will be manning the controls here at Y Option. As always, stay safe, stay steady. Much love.